Hello everybody, today I will be talking about one of the most underrated design tools, the Perceptual Map. In this video I'm going to explain to you what it is, how to use it, and what to do in order to bring it to the next level and to communicate things most clearly. So if you're curious, let's go. So what is the Perceptual Map? The Perceptual Map is a 2D axis system. On these two axes we have 4 attributes. These are always come in pairs, right? More or less opposites of each other, right? So this could be on one side futuristic, and then the opposite would be maybe traditional. And then on the other axis, you could have something like complex and simple, right? So then you would have 2 pairs of words that compose the perceptual map. And on this map, you take now the relevant brands, the competitors, your client's brands, and you try to arrange them on the perceptual map to get an overall understanding. Where are most of our competitors? Which quadrant of our system is the most occupied? Where can we identify gaps on the market that we can use to gather new customers and find niches that are still underserved? I think one of the greatest advantages of this perceptual map is that it's super easy and clear. Like everybody from business to engineers to marketing, administration, everybody knows how to read like a simple axis system. And especially with these words, it's very clear how to read things. That allows us to communicate the idea of gaps, of positions of value in the market, of competition very clearly to a broad audience, like to all the stakeholders of the project. In order to perform a perceptual map or to apply and use one, you have to make a market review. So in this example, I just used one for a project I worked on for suitcases, right? Where I looked at different suitcases. And the client assignment was to see if there is value in working for a gap that is a mix between like the backpack and the formal business suitcase. Is there a market gap? Is there a chance opportunity to work on this further to create a hybrid between these two very common travel modes? So I looked at, let's say, some of the well-known competitors like TravelPro, Samsonite, Tumi, right? They're obviously much more Ruva, for example. I got an initial understanding of the price landscape, the aesthetic appearance, but also the functions that are implemented in these suitcases, like a USB connections to power bank, or there's coat hangers inside. Different materials are being used, recyclable or not. Some duffel bag rollers with straps, right? Very different. TSA locks. So here I can basically get a good understanding of the actual situation on the market and the differentiators of the product. And now I can start building my perceptual map. So this was one that I built initially, where I divided the axis in traditional and modern in terms of aesthetic. So this is a much more aesthetic axis system, and in functional and simple. And based on this example, I more or less placed these competitors and also placed Voyager Elite in here and indicated also the target positioning for Voyager Elite's brand. So they would want to move up in the functionality scale, while appearance-wise they are already where they are in terms of being more modern than traditional, more minimalistic, more dynamic. It seems like there's a good gap here, but I also want to show you a second example where I used completely different labels. And with completely different labels, we create a completely different perceptual map. And I want to take this example to make this very clear. Now I exchanged what was before traditional and modern into minimal and decorative. So it's still an aesthetic thing, right? And it might be even somewhat correlated because modern tends to be more minimalistic and traditional ones more decorative, but it has a slightly different nuance, right? And then we have performance and convenience. Functional and simple even also is not that far from it, right? Functional and performance work hand in hand. Convenience and simple maybe not as close, but still that seems to be somewhat of a connection, and yet the map looks quite different, if you ask me. And obviously, this is not the process that you go through all just by yourself, but you get in all the different stakeholders, so you can also place these competitors differently, or at least within your design team, you try to find positions for these items to make sure that they are placed correctly and not just your subjective interpretation of how these come across, right? But if you look at this map with these new labels, then we have one sector that's completely empty, the decorative performance sector. And I can imagine to have some suitcases or backpacks in this sector actually, right? But it's very different from what we have in the first one. So if the labels are so important with the perceptual map, how do we find the right label? So which one is now the better perceptual map, right? So in order to find the right labels, we have to look into customer feedback, we have to read the project brief, and we have to basically make a market analysis and figure out what are things that the client clearly wants to improve, right? That are a significant new characteristic of the object, so that we can place on the perceptual map what is a key differentiator for customers that actually drives their purchase decision. So why would they choose this compared to another one? So if we place these attributes on our map, then we also have not just an aesthetic and functional, but also a value-derived perceptual map. And also we can use a perceptual map to answer a question clearly. So depending on the question, this can be a very different perceptual map, but we can answer questions like, is there a market gap in the sector of suitcases for this specific type in this specific price range, for example, right? And then we can try to find the right labels to answer that specific questions and have another perceptual map for a different question, for example. In general, labels can be of any kind. They don't have to be just aesthetic or functional. They can also be emotional or economic, right? Is it like premium price range, low-end price range? And if you then combine aesthetic and emotional or functional and economic labels, then you get like a broader impression of the market landscape. So with this in mind, I have third perceptual map now, where I have a formal, where aesthetic axis, which is formal and outdoors, right? Because I think this is one of the key differentiators between suitcases and backpacks. So I think for this specific case, it makes a lot of sense to use this as the labels, but it's very aesthetic oriented, right? And then I have a functional axis, which is also functional aesthetic still, dividing soft and rigid. So obviously most suitcases are in the rigid range. And I would say that in order to make this a real good perception map, I would have to dig in and find more examples of other backpacks potentially, or existing hybrid solutions that have a combination of both, right? But already here, I feel like I have a better understanding of where Voyager Elite wants to position themselves in, right? They want to be more formal and yet functional and integrate the benefits of the soft functionality backpacks have. I hope with this video you got to know a new design tool that you can use, and it's very intuitive and easy at first, but if you want to make really strong ones, really think about the labels deeply, share your thoughts and discuss with colleagues to make your perceptual map the best map it could be, that communicates your ideas clearly, and then present it to your clients, and you will see immediately that the clients react positively. Even letting them move around different brands on the map gives them a feeling of being part of the process, like it's interactive, not just being presented with a final result that they cannot change anything. If you like what I did, follow for more content on design, creative thinking, and AI.